Hi, I'm Jason Gorber for That Shelf, and we're here to talk about the legend that was Harry Belafonte.
Big shelf.
So today we got the news that the legendary actor, activist, role model, political icon, complex human being who had disparate ideas that didn't always coalesce with what was popular, what was important. But for me, an incredible musician, incredible performer, absolute one of the touchstone artists in my formative years. Somebody that really opened up the world of music in a way that we completely take for granted now. He got a lot of negative attention, a lot of positive attention for creating this sort of dream of the musical melting pot. And it's so easy now to be cynical about such things, about drawing from these different elements, and somehow we talk of words like appropriation as if musical silos are so stultified that one can't navigate. Other artists that come to mind, anybody from the Everly Brothers to, of course, Ray Charles, that navigated this sort of blend of different musics, of different frankly, different ideas, and found expression within themselves, speaking to audiences, both general and specific, highlighting the performers that sort of surrounded his world, bringing attention to people who would become legends themselves. Just an absolute extraordinary talent, and one I just thought we'd take a little bit moment to celebrate. I have a giant pile here of stuff that sort of means a lot. But if there's one record really you're going to listen to celebrate Harry, it's this one. It says Live at Carnegie. This is the Analog Productions Silly box set. This is normally like a dollar bin record. There's so many millions of these sold. But this is the 45 RPM exclusive version. It actually includes stuff originally recorded. This is one of the best recorded albums of all time. Absolutely extraordinary living stereo presentation. Back when they were just experimenting with stereo reproduction, Carnegie Hall obviously has amazing sound of the best of times. But the stuff that they're doing in the mid-50s, I mean, it literally sounds like he's in your lap. And while I never had a chance to actually meet Mr. Belafonte, it was a dream to sit down and sort of discuss with him the many periods, the many different ways that he navigated all the songs through his career. This is the closest I feel to having sort of been in a room with him. This concert's so well recorded, you feel like you were there. It includes many of the big hits, the Deos and stuff like that. But there's one track on here that I do want to talk about it. Again, my parents had this record, and this was the first time, I mean, as ridiculous as it sounds, this was the first time I heard a black man do Have a Nagila. And I use that, I can be absolutely cynical, as I said. We can be cynical. We can say, well, it's Carnegie Hall, so he's playing in Upper East or Upper West Side, whichever, I forget how it works. Bunch of, rich Manhattan Jews that show up at Carnegie Hall, and he's placating them with something that maybe they would be familiar with, and so he's just sort of playing to the audience. I don't think that, that may play in the absolute cynical thing, but I absolutely saw it that here's this guy, here's this incredible musician who's taking something from my culture and re-expressing it back to me. And I remember as a child just feeling like, maybe I'm cooler because somebody like Belafonte is singing my stuff. And when we hear about what's going on these days with a bunch of people finally getting a chance to actually see themselves on screen in ways that traditionally weren't encouraged, anything from Black Panther to look at Everything Everywhere All at Once, winning the Oscar. You have people and communities underrepresented that have sort of seen their stories brought to life. But in a funny way, I who come from a culture that obviously has been very, very much associated with popular culture, saw through him, through his singing of folk songs and traditional songs from this massive pile, and he just treated it as music. He treated it as performance. And I get that in 2023 that seems almost fatuous. It's the same way when I grew up, the sort of divisions between things as explicitly as gender and race and stuff like that. The almost how Dr. King's words about, that we're not going to see these differences, and now the differences are so sort of even more firmly entrenched that we can't actually sometimes see the things that actually bring us together. This was a time where there was real and dramatic issues at heart, a rot made overt at the time, and whatever it was, his solution then, musically, was to bring things together. Now, there's also a guy that went to Venezuela and talked about how the stuff that was going on there was sort of politically advantageous. Incredibly complex politically, and I just need to articulate how deeply his music sort of introduced me to how wide of a world music was, how much we could draw from, how much enjoyment and pleasure and depth there was in anything from a Russian folk song to my own culture's folk songs to something as simple as there being holes in buckets and him singing along. The characters that he brought on Carnegie too, which we'll get to in a sec. The other folk singers, people like Miriam Makeba, just an extraordinary gifted individual. But we'll get to one song that truly transformed my life in many ways. It took me years to actually find a record, and it's actually a visual thing. But for now, that's sort of the go-to if you're going to listen to anything. And then I just want to go through some of these records. I mean, here's Belafonte, Waterboy, Troubles. This is him doing Suzanne, Matilda, these Unchained Melodies, these sort of straight up folk stuff during the folk craze. But he did it with that incredible voice, and again, he brought almost a solemnity to some of these tracks, while being super playful. His voice was so playful. He was so charismatic when he sang that really is what made it happen. As I said, it was the world that he brought. Him. It's absolutely through him that I learned about people like Miriam Makeba. Obviously, her role eventually working with Paul Simon and the Graceland project came to be. But with Miriam Makeba and her specific use, I mean, the admonition that she actually gives to the crowd when she talks about that, this is what they call the click song, was my first sort of recognition that maybe this stuff isn't so simple. Maybe it's just not entertainment. Maybe that all music is politics and political, even if it seems super happy and there's smiles on their faces. Nonetheless, this South African titan that he helped absolutely bring international attention to. Then you have stuff like, again, numerous live records. We got Live at the Greek Theatre. This is a really amazing recording. But look at this, Belafonte live in Canada. This is specially priced 2 record set. I think it's O'Keefe Center, if I'm not crazy. Yeah, recorded at the O'Keefe Center in Toronto, Canada in the early 70s. Look, him doing straight up, almost minstrelsy. Look Over Yonder, Be My Woman, Mr. Bojangles. He does Suzanne, does the Leonard Cohen song. I believe that's that, Suzanne, not Susanna. And then, he's got Letambulu in this. Also, more African music brought to here. Ella Mitchell in here. And again, Abraham Martin and John, him talking about the assassinations. Who was so close to many of these world leaders and actually was just such a strong and public voice for all of that. Again, Greek theater. Carmen Jones, here's Harry Belafonte on stage. The original soundtrack for Oscar Hammerstein II's Carmen Jones, essentially a redux of the opera. We have Streets I've Walked, absolutely mega record. So he's got Sit Down, and second song is Erev Shel Shoshanim. Can't even say it. Erev Shel Shoshanim. You'd think that I could get the Hebrew right, but of course not. Then into Waltzing Matilda. So you have this this Israeli folk song followed by this generic Australian theme, and then a South African song, Portuguese, Amen, a Negro spiritual, as it says on the back. So a bunch of gospel mix, and again, songs of people, places, and traditions. He brought traditions to recordings in a way that, there are those that thought of him as essentially middle of the road, and for me, he was anything but. He brought a ferocity at times, even with his most soothing tracks, and it was amazing. What do we have here? We have Calypso. We have Jump Up Calypso, probably the thing that he was most known for a while. Calypso, this is the record that actually has Deo, it has Jamaica Farewell. Again, these are songs that he helped popularize, island songs, as it were. This one, Sweetheart from Venezuela, Baby Boy, Gloria, he does Go Down Jordan. Again, these straight up gospel tracks repurposed in these records. Absolutely extraordinary. We have Belafonte ballads, blues, and boasters. Really, really amazing recording. This one's Tone the Bell Easy. Such an amazing performance right on the first track. Then you have him working with other international audience, people like Nana Mouskouri. So here's the Belafonte Mouskouri album. Two great artists and programs of songs from Greece. So here he is bringing Greek tunes to an American audience. The Belafonte album. This one's sort of, I believe, this is produced specially for Kraft Foods Limited, a sort of a greatest hits compilation. Belafonte sings Songs of Love. Again, another compilation. Another Canada track, Belafonte Canada 74. It's contemporary, it's Calypso. And this one is, live from Canada, including 2 songs by Gordon Lightfoot. Extraordinary. My Lord, What a Morning, Harry Belafonte, another one of the early tracks on Living Stereo. A legend, him working with Lena Horne, like the jazz legend. Here's him doing duets, doing a bunch of tracks from Porgy and Bess. Itself a really complex but incredibly important tale of African American life, seen through essentially the great American opera. Absolutely astonishing. We have An Evening with Belafonte, Belafonte by Request, Belafonte on Campus, sort of milking that whole sort of campus folk scene. Roll On Buddy, The Hands I Love, The Last Thing on My Mind. Sail Away Ladies, all on this one. We have his Abraham, Martin, and John record, again, a commemoration in part about the death of Martin Luther King, JFK, and Abraham Lincoln. Harry Belafonte, of course, I believe a pallbearer, but certainly at the funeral of Martin Luther King, but also there at the Washington Square. One of the people who brought in all the artists, brought in the Dylans and the Joan Baez's and stuff like that, and actually provided a bridge for those people to come. Swing That Hammer. Again, the Belafonte folk singers, conducted by Robert de Cormier. Straight up, just fun music. Look at this, Calypso Carnival. I mean, just swarthy, sexy-looking Belafonte there, rocking the shirt. This is certainly when he was having a little bit more fun. And speaking of that, none of these are in particularly order, as you can see. Here's Harry Belafonte sings 5 early songs. Amazing record. Homeward Bound, Belafonte doing Paul Simon. Absolutely, If I Were a Carpenter. Again, this is him on record doing Suzanne. So, milking the sort of singer-songwriter idiom, but doing it through his own voice. This one is a really interesting, 80s, early 90s? 80s. I'm going with 80s. Record. It's the Paradise in Gazankulu record. Again, leaning into more African sounds. In My Quiet Room by Belafonte. Extraordinary record. Belafonte sings the Caribbean or Caribbean, whichever way you look. Another Lena Horne compilation. This is Harry and Lena. Again, so sexy, so amazing. The performances are extraordinary. His instrument was just astonishing. Mark Twain and Other Folk Songs. Very early Belafonte record, again, just when he was actually becoming, reaching out and sort of finding a larger audience. And then we have here some of my sort of audiophile releases. This one's on Impex, the amazing label. The Many Moods of Harry Belafonte. Sounds unbelievable. This recording is just astonishing how good of a recording it is. Incredible vocals. Just fabulous. We have another Impex here. This is Belafonte Sings the Blues. 45 RPM set. Really great. And then we have Midnight Special. This is an original Canadian, but this is the Speaker's Corner release. Also, beautiful record. He obviously sings the title track, Gotta Travel On, Did You Hear About Jerry? But yeah, he does On Top of Old Smoky, and somehow makes it feel like an event. He does Michael Row the Boat Ashore. Again, straight up sing-song campfire folk, and yet he makes it feel important. And then, yeah, I have a gazillion versions of the Carnegie Hall records. This is the Return to Carnegie Hall, where he actually brings more artists. This is the 200 gram Quaix version from Classic that originally came out. As good as the Carnegie Hall show is, and is really damn good, this one's actually almost more fascinating. Again, Chad Mitchell Trio, bringing in that sort of college folk scene. Odetta. This is basically would have been the first time I ever heard Odetta. Miriam Makeba, for sure. Then the Belafonte folk singers, I could get a chance. And then Belafonte, and again, doing the break thing, he does Hinematov just beautifully. Just an incredible version of it. And just the stuff at Carnegie is just extraordinary. Again, here we are, the Classic Records version in the gatefold. Just absolutely phenomenal. And then a DCC of Jump Up Calypso. This is Steve Hoffman's company when they released the sort of high-end audio stuff. Sweetheart from Venezuela, Go Down Emmanuel Road, The Baby Boy, Gloria. Again, this is where Jump in the Line comes from, used in many a soundtrack. But this just sounds ridiculously amazing. And again, another version. I have a bunch of these Canadian versions of Return to Carnegie Hall all going. But the one I want to sort of end up, this is the record I looked forever for. And this is Turn the World Around. This is the original recording on vinyl of it, but the original performance of this song, if I got my history correct, there's Harry, was on The Muppet Show. It's a very famous episode, one of the great episodes of that show, and something I remember watching as a kid. I remember vividly seeing, and he did Deo, and Deo's so, when you're a kid, Deo's so energetic and so wonderful, and the way he does it with on the Muppet Show is amazing. It's so hilarious, because it's clearly a song that he just played to shit. It's a pretty silly straight, it's like Louie Louie, but somewhat more glorious, and that takes nothing away. I think Louie Louie is a masterpiece, but him messing with it with the Muppets was so joyful and so entertaining and comical. But when he came and told this simple song about coming from the fire and going to the fire, turn the world around, and this beat, the semi-clave, and then as ridiculous as it is, and again, it's this fine line between something that feels simplistic and appropriative, but in my case, it was revelatory and truly worked in all the ways that you would want to, which is the African masks, the mask designs that would come and sing with him, and sing back up on this song. Structurally, musically, the way that the actual beat worked, transformed the way I heard music. It absolutely opened me up to a lifetime of, I mean, for God's sakes, you can do a direct line from that song to my love of everything from Fela Kuti to James Brown to obviously everything that happened in the 80s with the Stings and the Gracelands, Paul Simons and the David Byrnes, all these white boys who were like bringing all this African stuff. But Belafonte just felt that he was of the music. He was bringing this, essentially this pop African-ish straight up sound and just injecting it into my soul. And that moment where he sings with those masks, and the way the song essentially works as almost a drone, that the chords are sort of changing around on a pedal note, which to this day I adore so much, to actually have essentially the bass playing one note and the chords sort of playing around it. I love it when Pete Townsend does it. I love it when Angel and Weber does it. I love it when Schoenberg does it. And I certainly love it when Harry Belafonte does it. So this is, again, the recorded version of Turn the World Around. It's good. It's nowhere near as good as the one on the Muppets. But this is one of those records that I just sought out for years. Before Discogs, before any of that stuff, I'm like, what is this song? Because it was almost, before YouTube, before all that stuff, it's now easy. It was this half-remembered thing about how much it meant to me. And at the Ontario Science Centre, they had, years ago, like this late 70s, early 80s, they had a big Muppets exhibit, and we actually could see the creatures. I remember, it was amazing. You're seeing actual Kermit, and that just breaks your brain. I mean, it's ridiculous. I've actually done a press conference with Miss Piggy as an adult. But when I walked in, I remember I walked in the rotunda, and the masks were there, and I just remember this feeling of just adoration. And that adoration was because one man, one artist, one performer brought me in, took me by the shoulders warmly and said, here's a world you may not be familiar with, but it's a beautiful one. It's a world of music. It's a world of different cultures and different faces and different places. And I'm going to take you to these places. He was gifted with the ability to bring people along at his best, to bring them into his world and use his incredible good looks and his incredible voice and his incredible taste and turn people on to this stuff in the deepest, most profound way. He managed to turn my world around. He took me out of my sort of suburban setting and showed me an entire planet of stuff to explore, and that has shaped the way I listen to music, that has shaped the way I watch film, that's shaped the way, hopefully at my best, on my best days, the way I live my life. He lived a long and amazing life. His last film he did with Spike Lee as an incredible moment, completely bullshit in terms of the history of what actually takes place with BlacKkKlansman, but for me, my favorite part of the entire movie. Because fuck it, if you can actually have Belafonte in there doing what he does in that movie, and I don't want to ruin it too much if you haven't seen it, just go watch BlacKkKlansman just for that moment alone. It's just, he's gone, but he will never, never be not in my heart. He's one of those artists that I truly, truly cherish. Obviously, I listen to all the time. And it's funny, he gets relegated into this sort of easy listening kind of thing sometimes. He's a bargain bin. If you're a collector of vinyl, the stuff just sort of ends up being thought of as something that the other generation sort of disposes of. But those that know. Those that know that this was a serious artist. Absolutely on par with so many of his contemporaries. An incredible performer, incredible actor. I barely scratched the surface of his filmography, as comical as that is. Just when he was absolutely in his prime and just wrestling Hollywood into actually showcasing talents such as himself. But it's stuff that he was able to do on stage with a little, not that he had no struggle, but it was a little bit quicker for him to be able to tell the stories and bring attention to the artists that he wanted to bring attention to. And because of that, I will forever cherish this man. So some words on now the always great Harry Belafonte. do me a favor, whatever time you watch this, thank you for watching, first of all. Thank you for supporting this channel. It really means a lot if you subscribe, leave a comment, let me know what you think of Harry and his music. But go listen to stuff. Go listen to some tracks and take some time and cherish this extraordinary talent. He will be missed. For thatshelf.com, I'm Jason Gorber. Thanks so much for watching. We will see you next video. All the best. Take care.